For those of you who don't know me, I think 90% of you do. My name is Richard Williams. I'm based in Germany and part of the Germany and Switzerland branch of Labour International. I'm also the political education officer for Labour International. And I think as part of that role, Graham asked me to assist today in moderating the event and trying to put together a bit of an agenda for Giedo and Laura. I should say I'm certainly not on the same level of expertise as both of them, and so I'll let them do most of the talking today. My role is really to moderate and, of course, to yeah, put some interesting questions to them, hopefully from all of you. And we do have a rough structure with us. And for those of you who were at the event yesterday, organized by Boyd, we'll try to follow a similar agenda. So we'll start with around 20, 25, kind of max 30 minutes of discussion between Laura and Giedo. If any questions do come up during that, please do feel free to stick a hand up or write a question in the chat, and we can, of course, go into them. And then what we'll do in the second half, kind of in the last half an hour or so, is open up the floor for a broader discussion. So if you've got any really meaty topics you want to get into, then wait until then and we can pose questions then directly to Laura and Guido. In that case, I'll just give a brief introduction from my side, and of course then to Guido and Laura, and then we can get into things. We've obviously got a very big topic to cover today, or to get started with, the topic of AI, which has already started to have a massive impact on vast swathes of the economy and on our day-to-day lives. You only need to open a newspaper in really any country to see the impact that the technology is already producing. In the UK, obviously, we've seen the announcements this week of policing reforms, including the introduction of a so-called National Centre for AI, which should help to track criminals. Elon Musk has come out in the last few weeks accusing Keir Starmer of fascism for his condemnation of the creation of sexualized deepfake images of real people, including minors, without their consent, by Musk's own AI tool, Grok. And in the UK economy, a report by Morgan Stanley, which was in the Times yesterday, indicates the introduction of AI has led to an 8% net reduction of roles in the workforce over the last 12 months alone. And that's especially impacted mid-career professionals with between 2 and 10 years of experience. As this is such a large topic, we're going to take one area into focus today, and I think it's an area in which Guido in particular is very specialized, and Laura, of course, can add a lot as well, and that's the impact of AI on work. I'd like to then at this point just give a brief introduction to our two guests. And if either of you would like to add anything, I'm sure you would, then please go ahead and do so. Firstly, Giedo, or I should say Dr. Giedo Jansen, is an associate professor of regulation of work at the University of Amsterdam. His research focuses really on the intersection between technology and labor markets. He's published widely on labor market inequalities, atypical gig work, work of voice, and how automation and algorithmic management are reshaping the skills which work needs and workplace democracy. He's going to help us answer a really, hopefully, simple question today. What does AI mean for workers and unions? And what happens to job quality, wages, and even organizing companies when AI comes into the mix? We've also then got Laura Caroli, or again, Dr. Laura Caroli, to give her proper title, with us today. And she is an AI governance and regulation expert based in Brussels. She served as lead technical negotiator and policy advisor to the MEP Brando Benifei, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, co-rapporteur of the EU AI Act. And she was directly involved in negotiations that produced this first comprehensive AI law globally, which of course will come largely into effect this coming August 2026. She's also worked in the US for the past year, and she can hopefully then give us an insight also into the diverging approaches on both sides of the Atlantic. And she can also give us the insider view into the considerations that went into shaping the AI Act and how regulation can help ensure that the fruits born of AI productivity are enjoyed by all. As I've said, we have an agenda for this session. We'll try to keep things around 60 minutes. And I think the first question I'd like to pose to you, Guido, if you don't mind, and that's really around the question of what could AI mean for the world of work without regulation? Might be a doomsday scenario, but I think that would be a good starting point to look at first of all.
So thanks, Richard, for the introduction. Nothing to add there. I think you summarized my resume quite neatly. So let me start by clarifying that you tackled quite a broad topic. AI can mean many things, and that's always the difficulty in this situation. And also the effects that AI can take, therefore, on jobs and labor market can mean many things. And that allows me to narrow the discussion down a bit, I think, to two risks that I think the policy debate, and I'm sure Laura will add at some point there, that the policy debate has focused on. Because um, scientists, but also policymakers, journalists. I think where the focus tends to lie is on a category of risks that I categorize as indirect risks. Those are the risks which AI generates for employment, for which jobs are going to lose, which jobs are going to benefit from AI, how does AI transform the skills that the workforce needs, how can workers adapt to those new skill requirements. And here, I think what makes the AI debate special, especially also in comparison to earlier waves of technological change, is that previous waves of technological change tended to mainly affect manual workers, low-skilled workers, perhaps those of executing routine tasks. Think assembly line workers, manufacturing work, administrative tasks, and so on. And of course, ever since the advent of generative AI, ChatGPT, LLMs, that narrative has started to change, and it's increasingly also then AI which is capable of performing those creative tasks, cognitive tasks, which therefore also affects different types of occupations, educated work, professional work, white collar work, if you will, and that I think is different. What the new aspect in the AI debate when it comes to a very old question about how is automation going to affect the labor market. But because it's such an old question, that those types of risks, I would say, are tackled or addressed by fairly old-fashioned types of policies. It is basically the policies which are already in place to compensate job loss, to buffer the more societal risks of AI when jobs are being affected. Think fiscal policies, jobs, or policies that may shift taxes away from capital, or so to make the tax mix as such that you tax capital instead of labor, to make sure that AI is labor augmenting rather than labor replacing. Think about social policies, good old-fashioned social policies, which are just there for unemployment benefits, job guarantee schemes, income support for those who are affected by this transition. And think about educational policies. I mean, if the skill requirements at the labor market are changing, the workforce needs to be up to date to be able to meet those new skill requirements, and therefore people need to be trained for doing so. And that's one category of risks, which I think that what does the world look like without those policies? That's the world that we had before the introduction of the welfare state. We can all imagine what that looks like, where there's no social safety net. And therefore, I also don't think that those are the policies which are too much at the point of discussion or to be at risk itself. Then there's this second category of risks, and that is, I think, where also regulation has focused mostly about, and that is the risks that come with another category of AI, which I think is most prominent in the world of work, algorithmic management. So these types of algorithmic systems which take over not the task by workers, but also the task by managers, scheduling, performance appraisal, performance review, monitoring, surveillance of workers, and so forth. And those, of course, they come with all kinds of risks, which are more normative, more ethical risks, pertain to the quality of work, the autonomy of workers, fairness in the decisions of AI. And that's, I think, a very different type of risks, which of course are also managed by different types of policies, which I'm sure Laura knows again far more about than I do. But those are the privacy types of of regulations which set boundaries to what is permissible under what circumstances, to make sure that the privacy of workers is safeguarded, that they retain control over the jobs and the tasks that they're executing, that there is final decision-making authority for workers when AI systems are also in the workflow. So to close off this fairly broad introduction, there are two kinds of risks, and the policies that are needed are, on the one hand, I think, good old-fashioned policies that have been around for a long time, and then there's this new category of policies which have come into place to specifically address these newer types of AI-related risks, which directly affect workers, their worker rights.
Super. Thanks very much for the brief introduction, Giedo. It's a very nice start to the meeting, I think, and a good place for Laura to pick up from. I think at that point we can give over to you, Laura, to carry on from there. And perhaps you can give us a little bit of insight into the role of regulation when it comes to mitigating these risks. And maybe also, as you've got, of course, the experience in the US and with the EU AI Act, into the diverging approaches on both sides of the Atlantic.
Yes. Hello, can you hear me? Thank you, Richard, and hello, everyone. Really happy to be discussing with you here today. And thank you, Graham, for inviting me, by the way. So yeah, indeed, I have had the opportunity to see both sides of the Atlantic, what is happening on AI. As Giedo was explaining, not all issues can be tackled by regulation in general. So basically, to make a very concrete example, the AI Act is a big example of legislation on AI. It's the most comprehensive there is in the world as of now. And the part on algorithmic management and so workers' rights is quite prominent, actually, because of a few people who were sensitive to it, namely me, my boss, and the trade unions that were helping us along the way. This is important to mention because these things happen through multi-stakeholder dialogues and concrete data points and experiences that stakeholders can give you. So, and activists that just lobby and advocate for the right things. So we inserted as much as possible in the AI Act on workers' rights, even though it's not a piece of legislation that is meant to protect rights of people, because it's meant at making sure that AI systems circulating in the single market are safe and respond to certain requirements. This, of course, has various implications, including on fundamental rights of people, because when AI systems perform correctly in a way so as not to discriminate, etc., and banning unacceptable practices, then you have a framework whereby the rights of people, including workers, are protected. So, as to the extent possible, the AI Act has this risk-based approach. So basically, it divides AI systems into unacceptable practices that are outright banned, and these include systems such as social scoring systems, like it happens in China, where the government collects data on everything about citizens and basically ranks them on the basis of a collection of points from various situations of life, from, I don't know, university grades to how many times you visit your parents, to how much you respect road regulations when you drive, etc. They give you access to benefits or limitations if you're in a negative context. We limit. We ban biometric categorization, the fact of an AI system, the possibility of an AI system to infer, I don't know, the religious beliefs of a person, or whether a person is right wing or left wing, or the political convictions, trade union memberships, even. So an AI system cannot say this person looks as a lefty, basically. And this is important. Imagine just an AI system saying this person might be a Jew. I let you imagine the consequences when this is wrong, and even just imagining how wrong it is to single out people because of this. Or if people are straight or homosexual, for example, another very big important distinction. This is now banned in Europe. And this also has implications on workers. For example, I mentioned the trade union membership is not inferable by an AI system anymore. But then, so these are the banned practices. There are more, but I don't want to list the whole of it. Then you have the bulk of the AI Act is about high-risk AI systems. These are the main regulated cases of AI, uses of AI. And among the most sensitive high-risk AI systems, we have various areas such as education, migration, law enforcement, but importantly, workers' rights, employment. So we have AI used in hiring or termination decisions, in task allocation. Imagine, I don't know, a platform like Uber allocating a task, I mean a ride to a specific client, to a rider, a driver, and based on the characteristic of a person, on profiling of a person, so massive data collection again, because as Guido said, when it comes to workers' rights in the workplace, a lot of what happens, the bad use cases you have with AI come from an excessive data collection. So the basis of it all, the roots of it all, is privacy, the personal data and the protection of personal data of workers and of citizens, of course. Some employers think that because a person works for you, you have the right to collect more data about them. This is not the case in Europe, where we have GDPR that has specific provisions on the collection of personal data at the workplace. And this is for a reason, because workers in the workplace are in a unique position of imbalance of power. And so without knowing and being able to control what data is collected on them, they are not able to exert their rights. What, for example, what we did in the AI Act we included the obligation for deployers of AI systems to inform workers when they deploy it at work, inform workers and also their representatives. Why? Because just informing an individual that is in an imbalanced power position entails that person might not have the opportunity to enforce his or her rights. Whereas if you inform workers' representatives, they might have that negotiating power that is much bigger than an individual person, without the fear of retaliation. It was very important to include this. We have the fact of having these practices as high-risk practices entails that the AI systems must be designed in a certain way so as to have a proper risk management system, to have proper data governance, so as to avoid biases, biased data sets, etc. You have to be able to reconstruct the whole decision-making process of the AI system. So because you need to be able to provide an explanation for a certain decision. We have this right in the AI Act. I mean, and so this is why it is very important that these practices are high risk. Now, I also have to say that the fight is not entirely over, because, again, as I said, the AI Act is not the appropriate tool to regulate workers' rights, because we also need to take account of the legal basis and legal considerations in general. And so that is why in Europe, the European Parliament is still advocating for a specific instrument on AI at the workplace. Because, sorry, I didn't mention, but it's important to mention that, okay, we said the basis of it all, of why workers' rights are particularly impacted with AI, is the collection of personal data. But why? Because workers are increasingly being monitored and directed through automated means that often are AI systems, in such an intrusive way sometimes that you have, apart from the cameras everywhere that give information directly to the employers to direct you in a certain way. We have the famous case of the Amazon robotic arms that direct workers to a specific section of the warehouse, so as to waste as less time as possible, and the monitoring of what you do on your laptop, basically, for workers that work on content. This exploded during COVID with remote workers, remote work in general. The possibility for employers that want to control you to count your keystrokes, to assess how much time you spend on a certain tab on your browser, or on a certain Excel spreadsheet, etc. Or even for call center workers to detect the tone of your voice, whether or not you are being friendly to the customer, etc., whether you're too stressed to be able to perform your duties. So these are concerning use cases. And yes, and this is also why, by the way, the AI Act bans emotion recognition at the workplace. And education, okay? Because, again, the fact of being able to infer the emotion of a person through an AI system is already per se very dystopian, because emotions are a very subjective, personal thing in the first place, and we don't express emotions across cultures in the same way, and we also people with a certain disability, for example, might move the face in a different way than a person without a disability. So for an AI system to generalize and say this person is mad, or things like, or happy, or whatever, or lying, this is just not possible, especially in a context of imbalance of power, such as workers at the workplace. So this is why the fight is not over. It is very important to be aware of these issues. I just came back, I told Richard, from a conference in Canada organized by the University of York in Toronto, where the trade unions there were present and very much interested in understanding more about AI at the workplace. They were very concerned about how their rights were impacted, and didn't know how much power they might have in understanding the situations better. So being aware of their rights and how they can be impacted and what they can actually do, because there is a lot they can do. And as I said, we worked a lot also with trade unions in Brussels, with the ETUC, Trade Union Confederation, to really make sure we were going in the right direction. Now, very briefly on the US. This is all very nice. At least we are doing something, But when it comes to the US, my past year has been, I have to say, very depressing, to say the least, because when I went, it was still the Biden administration, and I have to say something that people don't appreciate a lot, which is that during the Biden administration, with the Biden executive order on AI, etc., the Europe and the US were actually very, very close in approaching AI. They had very similar sensitivities, and of course, the US is also a different judicial legal system, so they don't regulate to the detail that we have in Brussels, etc. But they still were very advanced in their thinking about the risks of using AI on citizens, including workers. Whereas now with the Trump administration, everything has changed very quickly. And the new mantra in Washington, D.C., where I've been for the past year, is innovation, 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 race against China. So we need to reach AGI as fast as possible. We need to do it before China, because otherwise the world ends. And so the price is paid by everything else and everyone else. So the rights of people are not considered, let alone workers. Let's not even mention the word. The environment is not considered, because, of course, this massive outreach to build up this massive AI infrastructure means harming the environment, because these data centers and compute you need for these massive AI models requires an enormous amount of energy and an enormous amount of water. Let me be just very simple without going too much into specific details. But I have to say that even in this context of massive deregulation, I am still encouraged a bit by the fact that the AI action plan of the Trump administration that was released in July actually has a section on workers. And so it is a policy document, of course, because as Giedo was saying, there is a regulation on one side and policy on the other side that is about supporting social security schemes or reskilling workers. Well, the Trump AI action plan has a section that proposes a lot of actions on retraining, reskilling workers, and supporting, examining better the impact of AI, the AI disruption on the workplace, in order to have enough data for a future possible intervention. So there is something, because the problem is there. If in the long term we don't have workers, because the job disruption is as big as they projected in the US, the narrative is very other. We won't need to work anymore. There will be no jobs. They are a bit hasty in doing making these considerations, but still, then who will pay the taxes? And how will the states then support these social security measures? It's not very clear, and it's important that the debates on this stay grounded and reflect on the need to govern this transition instead of just accepting that AI will disrupt everything and someone will pay a universal basic income to people. That's not as simple as that. So I will leave it here for
Thanks,
today.
Laura. That was a fantastic overview, and I think you covered a lot of points. And I know I gave you a massive question to deal with, but thank you for really a lot of interesting insights there. I think we also spoke briefly about some of the things when we had our kind of sync on Saturday in preparation for this meeting. You mentioned the theoretical example of what happens if insurance claims are decided by AI, right? It's one of those things that I think feels very tangible, but it's a very real use case. In the company that I work for, we're actually developing a product now for call centers to track the mood of the call agents based on their tone of voice. And I can tell you it's quite popular with the customers as well, I can tell you. I think one of the interesting points as well, and kind of in preparation now to go back to Giedo, I was speaking with I was speaking with our head of AI internally at our company, and I was asking him, how can ChatGPT and OpenAI justify the massive, the trillions of dollars they're saying they need to build the AGI, this kind of next level of AI, which should bring us into this utopian world that they dream of. And his answer to me was that the total addressable market for AI is all white collar work. In a dream world, you can essentially replace all white collar work with AI, the management, the kind of day-to-day, bottom of the rung stuff. And I was kind of left to think, well, is that really a world that we want to steer towards? And I think that's really interesting, the points that you raised about, how can we manage that through regulation? I think that's also, to go back to you, Giedo, briefly, it reminds me of a study I read in a book. I think it was from Mustafa Suleyman, actually, who's now the head of AI at Microsoft. He pointed to the computer revolution in the 70s and 80s, and he highlighted one study around the productivity paradox, the question around why aren't productivity gains showing up in the economic statistics. And I think there was a comparison there between the implementation of computers in the hospitality industry in Britain and Germany. And the example that was given was that in Germany, computers were introduced, staff levels stayed the same, and as a result, the quality of service improved. In Britain, on the other hand, computers were introduced, staff were cut, and the service level stayed the same, whilst the profit margins got bigger. So I think to now look a little bit at future scenarios, we obviously want to steer towards a world, as you put it, Guido, when we're speaking about labor augmentation instead of labor replacing, making sure that the fruits of AI are shared by all of society and not just the 3 or 4 companies that develop the best models. How do you see kind of the optimistic scenario? What scenarios do we have that we could steer towards?
In this debate, and especially when it comes to labor augmentation, there's one catchphrase, and I even don't know who coined it, but it's recurring in a lot of presentations, and it's so humans will AI will not replace humans, but humans who use AI will replace other humans, and that's placing the burden of being able to catch up on the individual. That is a world in which we say, regardless of how fast or slow technological advancements go, it's on the individual worker who needs to make sure that he or she is up to date in order to work with technology. And I don't think that is fair. It places the burden on the individual, whereas the burden also for the training capacity should be on companies, should be on society at large. Also because what we have seen, and this is not only with the AI transition now, but also before, when the debate was still called labor automation, people who are at most at risk of automation, they tend to participate least in work-related training. And that's not because they don't want to. That's not because they fear automation and therefore think that the training won't matter. It's not because they are too optimistic about automation and therefore think they will cope. No, it's because the demand for their training doesn't meet the supply. Employers, frankly, invest less in training for those who are most at risk. And that, I think, is an uneven investment. I don't think it's a wise uneven investment. But I think this is one of the ways in which the narrative of making this an individualized problem will, in the end, hurt society at large. And that's what my 2 cents are with the whole labor augmentation, the capabilities of people to be able to work with technology. There's one. I don't know if you had another question, because I wanted to come back to one point Laura made on the surveillance, because it is true. We recently did a study ourselves about the impact of surveillance on workers, and it extends beyond labor rights. Um, the question was introduced also by you or by Graham in the introduction. How does the AI affect the quality of work? How does it affect the meaning of work? What we did find was that workers who are more intensely monitored also feel less recognized by their employers. They feel watched, but they don't feel seen. And that does not only mean that they don't feel recognized within the workplace, it even spills over to a lack of feeling recognized by society at large. It fosters isolation in society. So these are real ramifications of workplace monitoring practices, which I think Laura pointed out quite well, skyrocketed during COVID, and for which also the more long-reaching consequences are yet to be seen. But when it goes unregulated, I'm not optimistic.
Thanks a lot, Giedo. Do you want to come back on anything there, Laura, or shall we open up for questions at this point?
Yeah, I wanted to add a couple of things to what Guido was saying, which is very complementary to what I also said. At the beginning, Guido, you spoke about the the extent of this AI impact on jobs, also to white collar and highly skilled jobs. But that's so not only automation, but I think it's also important to note how this revolution is particular compared to others because of the speed. And so the speed is so fast that adapting even the governance and the policy actions for regulators and for policymakers is not necessarily easy because especially when you need evidence-based data to conduct policy actions and you need money, by the way, to support this transition. You just by the time you have collected the data, it's already too late, basically. But at the same time, uh, there are arguments as to, I mean, Richard, me and you talked the other day about what is the biggest risk that comes with AI. And to me, we also agreed most of all that the biggest risk is the concentration of power that we have with AI. This also applies to companies. So basically, whoever detains the models that will be able very soon. Apparently, I don't believe in this AGI race. To be honest, I don't care about this date that keeps being shifted over and over in the far future or near or whatever. Is that even whoever detains these technologies will be controlling everything. But at the same time, workers do not only work for OpenAI and Anthropic and Google. They also work for a ton of companies, right? If these companies, there was we mentioned also this research that was published on the Financial Times a few months ago that showed that in a normal state of things, you would have the pyramid of jobs that goes from the junior level, entry level, which is larger, to the manager positions and the CEO, the top positions that are the summit of the pyramid. if you now cut jobs because you don't need junior workers anymore, you don't need junior consultants because ChatGPT does the work for them, does the job, and it's so easy not to pay a junior, and AI does not have to take lunch breaks and complain, etc., whatever. What you will have is that this pyramid is now diamond shaped because the entry is narrower. There are fewer people in the entry position. Okay, fair. But what employers should appreciate in this regard is that in the medium to long term, like in 10, 15 years, if they go along this way, their company will not exist anymore because nobody will replace the top positions. People will just retire and the company will cease to exist. And so this is why the concentration of power will still continue to go to the big players. And I don't think that most of the companies would be happy hearing this. So the disruption also applies to them in the longer run if they don't do anything. That's why I think, as Giedo was saying, I totally agree that companies should take responsibility as well, by, for example, hiring junior positions and just keeping them, supporting them, and training them for when they will become mid-level positions, without necessarily them having to work 12 hours a day because they just don't need to, but learning how to be
Hey, Laura,
augmented by AI. Yes.
if Richard permits me asking an indirect question here, I fully agree with that. The concentration of power is the $1 million question in the AI debate. And in that respect, I was wondering, how do you see the role of medium and small-sized enterprises? Because here we tend to portray it as a tension between workers and employers as the classic labor relations relationship. But in the field of AI, of course, it's also big tech, which just dominates also the rest of us. And also companies, even the big ones, you could argue, are in some way fully dependent on these big tech companies, well, even governments are. And especially, I'm worried about small and medium-sized enterprises, which in that constellation of the market are very much under pressure as well. Also for them, AI is very much opaque. They just buy whatever is on shelf without really having the capacity to know what they're actually buying and what the implications are. We surveyed a lot of small-sized legal enterprises the last year, and it surprised me, one, how few of them actually are working actively on AI, especially the very small ones, whereas the big legal companies, of course, are, but also how few of them actually have thought about any policies. They just use it. So my question is twofold. What about the medium and small size enterprises? For one, when it comes to the concentration of power vis-a-vis the big tech companies, but also about what does regulation mean in those types of contexts?
Yeah, interesting question. So regulations can actually affect both sides, both providers and deployers. Both of them can be medium or small SMEs, startups and the likes. So when it is about startups, for example, creating AI tools, etc., that they sell on the market, of course, they don't have the legal teams in order to be able to comply with everything. So they are much more risk averse sometimes because they face fines more quickly if they don't move, but they don't know this enough. So they are in a very confused position because they think they can disrupt everything, but they actually can't. So at the same time, deployers that are SMEs, in my opinion, are the worst impacted of all because they are small, so they don't have teams dedicated entirely to compliance, to legal compliance, whereas at the same time they also have faced the highest burden because when they deploy systems in a high-risk context, they need to do certain things and to be very careful of how they deploy the system. And if they don't have that knowledge that you were talking about, basically it's a disaster. We also have now, we can talk about shadow AI if you want. This is also another issue, and about how little managers know about AI. They just tell you in your company, your manager will say, we need to buy this AI. Everybody should adopt this AI tool. They don't even know how it works. They don't even know. It's just because it's fancy. Like now the talk is all about AI agents, right? So I will tell you a fun thing. Couple of months ago, I was in San Diego for privacy big conference, and I was on a panel on AI agents. So what are the risks of AI agents? And it was packed with practitioners who are very, very terrified of, the implications on compliance, etc. And there was someone from a company, a practitioner. She was very, very good. And she was explaining that basically in order to, when you have an AI agent within the company that goes on the internet and starts to do things, conclude contracts, negotiate, etc., etc. So, the typical thing is organize a trip, for example, as a travel agent. It can spend money, it can collect data, it can negotiate contracts, it can do a series of things. And if you don't have people in the company who control, who keep in check what the AI system is doing, AI agent, whatever we will call it, you face a lot of exposure to compliance issues. And so basically, this person was saying, in order to keep AI agents in check, you actually need to hire more people for compliance issues. So this is a way to say AI agents also contain in themselves the solution to job disruption in a way. And it's very important actually that I also complete. I'm sorry that I'm very wordy, but a lot of tasks and functions of society cannot be replaced by an AI system entirely. I keep imagining, like, I don't know, groceries. You still have to produce them. You still have to transport them. Okay, you can transport them automatically, but we are still very far from having trucks that are automated completely. You still need to get them to people. People need to eat. People need to govern. People need to have jobs.
And that's the thing, I think, that was what always bothered me with the Frey and Osborne study. When you look at that famous study, which projected that 47% of American jobs would be automated, I think almost by now already. They included all kinds of lawyers, judges in there as well. And I think that it's fair to say there are some occupations in society for normative reasons, we don't want them to be occupied. So exactly. They probably never will.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, sorry to interrupt you both.
Just one thing.
Yeah, Laura.
The AI Act actually introduces the human oversight as a requirement. So every AI system that is high risk, so hiring decisions, educational level determination, task allocation, law enforcement decisions, migration decisions, need to be overseen by people. In some cases, when it's biometric identification in law enforcement, they need to be overseen by two people even. So you need to have people still to do things. You need to have people to make laws. Okay, sorry, Richard, I will
no trouble, Laura. I mean, I think you can see from the depth of the discussion here how multifaceted and how long I think we all could speak about this issue. I think if we had 5 hours, we'd easily fill the time as well. But with a look at the time and with respect to both of you, especially Guido, I know you've got your hard stop at 8, but I think it would be good to move on to questions so we get some other people involved in the discussion as well.
I can do a couple of minutes after 8, but not for too long,
No
preferably.
worries.
Yeah.
Joe, you've got your hand up.
And thanks for setting up today's session. Really interesting remarks. I just wonder whether I could ask a question on AI sovereignty and your views on how we deal with that, especially in Europe, and whether or not it will ever be possible for Europe to have AI sovereignty. And for my sins, I'm an insurance supervisor, so dealing with lots of these issues.
Who'd like to go?
Well, that's a complicated question, right? We are, I mean, I'm sure you are very well aware, Europe is now reconsidering its need to step up to achieve some sort of sovereignty. But to be honest, we are still very much dependent on cloud services, networks, data centers, basic infrastructure that we still need from basically from the US, mainly even to develop our applications downstream. So even if we have a ton of good AI companies, we will not have the biggest models out there. And we will not have the same capacity of the clouds that we work on. So this is a simple answer. It's very complicated issue. I don't
Would you
know
like
if
to add
Guido
anything,
wants
Guido, to that, or shall we go on to the next question? Okay, then we'll go on to Terence. I think you're the next in line.
Good evening. Great thanks for this talk and everything like that. Very illuminating. I actually was thinking about this and my group in Southern France were last year in the relation of taxation and employment. And the government been able to raise taxation to pay for the various services. And it's very complex. And actually, to begin with, I was beginning to think about it. And the only way really I could actually look at it to begin with, because it's such a massive subject, is to break it down to the old English thing. How do you eat an elephant? A piece at a time. And AI is the same. And if you actually look at AI in relation to a spidergram and put AI at the center of the spidergram, it's a lot easier because everything flows off the spider graph. You've got employment, the ability to raise taxation by the government, and then you've got various issues linked to that with the government's been able to raise enough taxation through VAT. Then off that, you've got the other spin-off. That's in the insurance market as well. Cars, financing of cars, financing the mortgages. You've got a huge raft of things that's spinning from the center of the spider graph. And it's a huge complex area to deal with. But initially, I was actually looking at the national insurance stamps in the UK. If there's more unemployment, unemployment's got to be paid for. So the state has got to pay for unemployment. That's actually coming out of taxation, general taxation. So if there's a weakening in the taxation base, without a form of social taxation by the employers, where's the funds going to come for the various social services, health, education, whatever in society? That's basically my question. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks for everything.
Guido, you go first.
No, yeah, it's a fair question. I mean, the only way we can regulate it is via strong states, and strong states are the ones who can tax. It's as simple as that. And I think you raise a fair question. I mean, the same debate we're having, of course, with the aging workforce, which perhaps is a more temporary problem. Who knows? But yes, that does put pressure on the state and the welfare state, so buffering the risks, the very risks I was talking about in the introduction, first and foremost. I cannot paint a pretty picture here.
Maybe I would just briefly pen something to that as well, if you don't mind, and from my non-expert perspective. But I think it links nice backly to a theme that Laura also mentioned earlier with this idea of the concentration of power. And I think actually these two things are really closely connected with one another, the effective sovereignty of nation states and actually the wealth accumulation that these AI models and actually a lot of the kind of underlying big American tech companies lead to. And it should also be said that there is stated intention by some of these US billionaires to undermine the sovereignty of nation states. Most notably is Peter Thiel. I'm
Yes.
sure some people in the room know who he is. The PayPal mafia is the group he's a part with. Of course, now founder of Palantir, which is one of the most controversial AI companies in the security sector. But if anybody wants a very horrifying book to read, I can recommend The Sovereign Individual, which was written by Jacob Rees-Mogg's dad, Lord William Rees-Mogg, and has a foreword written by Peter Thiel. But it's a very interesting insight into the worlds that this group of people, the kind of hyper liberals, want to build towards, and actually undermining the nation state is, for at least some of them, a clear part of that, and that goes together with the accumulation of wealth. Frankie, if you want to come in.
Oh dear, it's not really a flow on now. You've concentrated on concentrated power. It doesn't really flow.
I'm sorry
It's
for that.
actually in the other direction. And I think I'll do it anyway. Really, because we're talking about these things in very global terms, in very generic, broad terms, yeah. We're talking about taxation being, what we're going to do to compensate, for the costs of this, which is a very standard sort of way in which the welfare state, if you like, has tackled, financing the costs of industry, if you like, on the workforce, whatever, whether it's AI, whether it was IT, whether it was, coal mines and and people and lung disease, whatever it was came off of these activities. It was always compensated for, and the costs were always paid for by taxation in general. And what worries me in that sense is I wonder if it's not time to change that a bit into some of the things that they used to do in the more nice liberal days, not conservative liberalism. In America, for example, that you exacted conditions upon companies that were locating in exchange for allowing them to locate. Now, it depended who they were, and sometimes it was a playground, sometimes it was quite more, but usually it was getting them to provide something in the local economy. Now, there have been some developments in which these kind of industries that take a lot of power and need a lot of water and need a lot of power to keep going. There have been ideas, and in some cases, in some situations, they've been implemented. That what you do is you kind of locate them in big canals or big areas of water, so that they don't have to use so much water, and you actually can, sink them down in the ground, and you can use waste heat from them, and then you can distribute that to heat local areas, industry and homes. And I wonder if and what worries me is the effectiveness and the flexibility of taxation to actually keep up with AI companies, and that perhaps we need to take a more intimate, a more micro approach to this development, and we have to look at the micro level possibilities here. So we say, we want you to do X and Y and Z. It's not that we're going to try to get as much tax out of you and hope we're effective in doing that. We want you to locate in these areas, and we want you to operate in this particular way. And that also applies to this generic idea of this risk that is, so to me, one of the risks is that we won't get the money from these companies. Another risk is that these companies will move, which they often have done, in the past. Whether these will or not, I don't know. But I would have thought that they were more flexible and more powerful, more affluent, more able to be mobile than their predecessors. And so it's going to be hard. So I wonder if we shouldn't, come down on how we actually deal with them and give permission for them to go ahead. I was very interested in Laura talking about the diamond, because I did a certain amount of work and research when IT was at its, zenith, if you like, in its terms of its introduction, and on the shape of companies and the shape of labour markets. And so your diamond, you haven't talked about the risks to the nature of work, not the numbers of work, but the nature of work. And this is what I'm looking at in both these areas: the nature of your taxation, how it's going to be effective, the actual nature of how you give permission, and the actual nature of the jobs that are at risk here.
I think at that point, frankly,
micro level.
sorry to interrupt you. I think we're a little bit over the time, so I'll let Giedo, if you want to cover your bit first, and if you need to leave at that point, we'll let you go.
No, that's okay. So the appeal for a more micro level approach. Let me share my thoughts on that topic then specifically. I think that, of course, the AI Act, and again, Laura obviously knows far more about the AI Act than I do, but it's a supranational framework. It's a minimum framework as well, which needs to be implemented, obviously also in the coming years at various levels. And I think if you look at more micro level in which, of course, the AI debate is going to be negotiated, it's in collective bargaining. It is in the negotiations, collective labor agreements between unions, between employees at the sectoral level, at the company level. So in more micro level places, if you will. And I think there, of course, there is a real opportunity to do more than also the framework says. Whether or not it will come to that, that's another question. But that's only to say, where Laura said the fight is not over, but the fight will also be brought to different tables in the coming years. And there, I think also unions, of course, unions are being threatened by automation on the one hand, and at the same time, I also see an opportunity. So let me also share and end my contribution with more of a hopeful message here. We did some research also on how much support there is among workers for AI regulation, and the support is frankly massive on all fronts. When you ask people how much they endorse policies in the realm of, again, taxation, social policy, training policies, massive support. But even more and even higher with respect to all these rights that Laura has been able to get into the AI Act about privacy, fairness, AI on the loop, all these things, people massively support it. So, and I think that what is also then going to be the challenge for the coming years is how to get the voice of workers to these tables and to these places where negotiations are taking place. But I think that for unions, there is a real opportunity here to mobilize. So people endorse it. Union members even endorse it a bit more than the rest of us. But there is also a real mobilization point here.
Thank you.
Yeah, and may I add that even in the US, people support regulation actually because they are terrified of losing their jobs. Because without their jobs, they don't have anything, even health insurance, and we'll just leave it there, as you know. So, yeah.
Super. Do we have anybody else who wants to come in with a question? Don't see any hands raised at the moment. Or if not, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share, perhaps, Laura and Giedo?
No, I mean, yeah. Sorry, Guido, go ahead if you.
No, I thought that ending on a hopeful note was already quite an ending. I can
Yeah.
say something doom and gloom again, but no.
Yeah, I think after 60 minutes of pessimism, probably it's good to leave it on a bit of a lighter note. But in that case, firstly, thank you both of you for taking the time to speak with us tonight. I think it's been a really interesting discussion, and yeah, hopefully illuminating for everybody who's been able to take part as well today. Of course, a big thank you to Graham, to the Netherlands branch as well, for the organisation of today's session. And of course, yeah, if you have any feedback, then please do forward it on to us. I think it will also be great, as Graham mentioned, if we can maybe make this into a series. We can look at some other areas where AI is playing a role in all of our lives in future sessions. Maybe we can even persuade Giedo and Laura to come back for some of those as well if they're very nice to us. But we'll see how that goes. In that case, thank you all once again for your time, especially Giedo and Laura. And I think we can wish everybody a very lovely rest of the evening.